I am really excited to finally sit down with Mario. Mario, I've been watching you for years, and I love the way you just simplify everything. And one thing that makes me laugh when I first started watching you, like, years back, and I went, oh yeah, he's an expat. I know that club, because you basically, I love your pillows of the US and the UK, the decor of celebrating both countries, because at my place in Shoreditch, there was a huge Union Jack, but then there were all these American flags. And, it was just my way of saying, I embrace both. So I always love that about your videos.
Yeah, and my wife, she's English. I'm actually originally from Brazil, but I did go to school in the States, and a lot of people think I'm an American, but we also got the Canadian pillow. Eventually, a lot of viewers had it. But right now, we haven't got those pillows on. But yeah, and it's interesting that you were speaking about starting a credit union and all these regulations. And back in the old day, you could just open, and the old day, I mean, probably the 19th century, you could open a bank and just, people would come and put gold and silver coins and you issue receipts. And if
Yeah.
you did something wrong, yeah, your depositors, your clients would take their money out, and your reputation would be shot. Nowadays, there's so much regulation that people, the general public, don't look into things anymore, because they think just because an institution is regulated that they're above board. So I would say that to the viewers.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to play the FDIC card on me, and as if that's the ultimate security vault. And then I have to turn around and say, hey, so do you actually know how much money they have? I mean, where's the accountability? When was the last time they had an audit?
Yeah.
I don't. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I haven't looked too much into the FDIC in detail. I know they guarantee $250,000 per account, but a few years ago, I think it was towards the end of the Obama administration, Citibank got the administration to pass a National Defense Authorization Act at the end of the year, putting the derivatives positions of the Wall Street banks into the FDIC insurance. So most people don't know that. And I would say that if there were a systemic crisis like there was in 08, 09, the FDIC insurance would mean nothing. And the same thing goes for FCSC, I think that's what, or FSCS in the UK. I've looked into them. They're not guaranteed by the government. They are funded by the banks that they insure. And the 80,000 or 85,000 that's supposedly guaranteed for every bank account, it might work, for example, if Metro Bank goes under, but if the 2 or 3 big banks go under, your 85,000 might be in peril as well. And I mean, you've spoken about bail-ins. That's another thing that could happen, right?
I mean, people don't really want to believe that. Last summer, I was just persecuted for saying that out loud. It was another way to laugh at me, for conspiracy theorizing. And I just thought that was absolute. Wait, what? What is the conspiracy here? How is this even, and then actually, I took a great interest in, Enron and understanding how these great big companies, too big to fail. I mean, I read that. I think it was Andrew Sorkin. I read that book, twice, because I was like, wait a minute, what did I miss? And it all came down to a damn laptop. And you're like, really, a company this size? And we assume that when great disasters happen, like in 2008, 9, I mean, I just showed up all like, bright-eyed in LA, like ready, because everybody had said, oh yeah, come to LA, and then you can work in this office, you can do this. And then you show up and the economy shuts down. No one's hiring. Everybody's, trying to to fend. And it was interesting that even then there was nothing done. We were just band-aiding over. And if anything changed the legislation where now it's lawful not only to just bail them out, but bail them in with your money.
Yeah, and I think the other thing people don't realize, because oh wait, there are a lot of derivatives, and if you watch The Big Short, it shows how a casino and Ponzi that is, and they never reformed the derivatives market. There's two derivatives market: the exchange traded one, where they trade futures and options like COMEX, CBOT, the commodity, let's say futures. That's regulated. All the positions are public. They're updated daily. The margins are set. But then there's a much bigger derivatives market that was created amongst the Wall Street banks. It's called the over-the-counter derivative, and that's a can of worms. And that's what led to the collapse of Lehman and the whole banking system. And I don't think they fixed anything. And apparently there's more than a quadrillion dollars of notional amounts of derivatives. And the bankers say, oh, it doesn't matter that it's a quadrillion because the position of JP Morgan versus Morgan Stanley, they net out. So we just need to pay the margin. But if one of the counterparties collapses, that huge notional amount comes into play, and that's what happened with Lehman's, and they haven't fixed that at all. Even if they say that, oh, we lowered the size of derivatives, it's still huge compared to the economy. They also changed the accounting. The Bank for International Settlements, right after the crisis, they changed it to instead of marking the derivatives to market, they market to model. What does market to model mean? It means the bankers can market it. They can mark the price of it however they want to, and we saw in The Big Short when those young guys, they bet the right way. And also, what was his name? The main character, he had the big position, and he was seeing all these subprime companies going bust, and his credit default swap didn't move. Eventually, the banks had to move it. So yeah, it's still a huge problem, and I think bail-ins are very possible, and they've done it before in the EU, i.e. Cyprus some years ago.
2013, I think. So it was, it was fought, it was long enough, but then equally still relatively within the short term. This is a lot for most people we have found to take on and understand. There's been a few things that have resonated that I've watched. The discussion of inflation and, transitory versus untransitory, and then how real prices can affect a CPI or the consumer price index. Are these kind of where you start when you have these conversations to try to break down? Where it's like a big apple, you just bite it.
I've been speaking about inflation for years, and the definition of it, I think, is really important. And we've been told in the last 20, 30 years that the central banks have gotten inflation under control. They've kept it around 2%. But the way I look at inflation, it's the increase in the supply of credit and currency out of thin air. And what that does, it dilutes the amount of money in the system or currency in the system. And it's just like a stock. Let's say IBM, if they come out and say, we're going to issue another 10 million shares, all the present shareholders, their shares are going to be worth less. And that's all inflation is when the central banks create with the governments, because the governments borrow, the central banks, they do QE to help keep the cost of borrowing down, and they create more and more currency. When government gets big as well, they spend a lot, and they can only spend by borrowing. And people who have been working for decades or even not that long, or pensioners, they've got like 10,000 pounds in the bank that they've been saving for 20 years. That 10,000 pounds becomes diluted He would have bought maybe a nice secondhand car 20 years ago. Nowadays, it doesn't. And it's just like the analogy would be inflation is when you put water in the milk and you drink the milk and it tastes a little different. And then the person puts more and more water and eventually say, well, where's the milk? That's what it is. It's just cheating. And the reason they can do that is because the system is a fiat currency system. It doesn't have any real commodity money, i.e. gold and silver backing it. Uh, I mean, there is credit in the gold and silver system, but there is a limit to how much you can create, because if you create too much credit in the gold and silver system, people will become a bit skeptical. And what they'll do, they'll go to the banks and withdraw their gold from the bank. And what that does is that raises interest rates. So, and then it slows down the creation of money and credit. But under a fiat currency system, the central banks, they've been manipulating interest rates for decades, and it's giving false signals. And up until recently, a lot of the inflation flowed into real estate, bonds, and stocks. But now it's flowing into the things that we need to survive on. And I think it's going to get worse, unfortunately.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I want to get to the Bank of England stuff, but I also want to talk metals fraud. And then because you keep mentioning QE, can we start with the Bretton Woods? It's like one of my favorite parts of trying to break down the economy. I mean, that's like it's our jam with Vicki and I trying to take it back to Bretton Woods.
Yeah, Bretton Woods. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
We're big fans.
Yes.
And last year when Blockworks did the event, I really did apply like an embarrassingly amount of times to try to attend. And they kept telling me I needed to be an institution or a world leader or, own a bank. And I felt really.
Who did that? Who was that?
So there was the Bretton Woods event last year that a lot of people dismissed as
Oh, yeah.
Which I still to this day, I don't know what happened. Well, I do. Well, I can, but something else was, it wasn't just pay $5,000 to attend as a CEO, C-suite executive. They had very, very, and they were like, here, I think you're better suited at the digital assets. I was like, yeah, I'll go to that one, but I want to go to this one. I want to be there when this history is made, because I really do think we'll have no choice but to bring back to that gold standard. I think I'm watching these BRIC nations and the alliances there and the forced hand of Russia and pushing an exchange. I think there will be some kind of default standard back to gold. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, definitely. Russia's been buying gold since, they've been increasing their gold reserves since around 2006. And the Chinese as well. The Chinese, they don't really report very transparently their reserves, but some people argue they've got like 20,000 tons. Right now, they're supposed to only have under 2,000 tons. And a lot of other non-Western countries have been buying a lot of gold. Like last year, Brazil increased their reserves by more than 60%. Even Ireland bought some gold as well, I think, last year. So,
they like depleted everything.
Yeah.
Have you about Canada catching up since they in 2016?
Yeah, Canada doesn't have any gold reserves. I mean, we probably have more gold than they have, even if you just have your wedding ring. But I think there was a survey by the World Gold Council who I don't like them, but they cover gold well. I don't like them because I think they're tied to the central banks, but they report well on gold. And they did a survey of their clients, which are major central banks and international organizations. And this year, the countries that bought a lot of gold last year, which are basically emerging market or global South countries, they're planning to buy even more. So, and why are they doing that? Well, because I think, like you said, they're going to have to go to some kind of system, new monetary system, because what happened in the Ukraine as well, uh, in the last few months, the fact that Russian reserves were frozen, or if you want to call it stolen, by the Americans. I just saw Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, yesterday said that countries could be punished severely if they try to disrupt the international order. I think that's a warning to China as well, that if you do something, we're going to freeze your treasuries. And I think that's it's almost like they're pushing them out of the dollar. So if you're going to have another parallel or another new system, you need to have something to back it. The only reason the dollar is still the global reserve currency, or the major one, is because it started out after World War II and Bretton Woods, and it had 2/3 of the gold reserves. People forget that. The only reason the dollar has credibility is because it used to be as good as gold.
That's right. Yeah. Now, on that note, the two theories that were brought forward at Bretton Woods, Vicki and I often talk about it, but I love to hear your thoughts. Was this Bancor modern monetary theory? Now, could you, and then this gold standard, which ultimately they say we went to the gold standard. But then let's talk about 1971, when it was a temporary step down. So is this not just a little slip of the Bancor, modern, like basically QEing almost what they tried to do, but then acted like they were creating an equilibrium with the gold standard, that they found out years later that, we could actually get away with a lot more spending and lining of pockets if we do it this way? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
You could be right. I mean, Bancor was a word that John Maynard Keynes came up with. He was the British representative at Bretton Woods, but that wasn't taken up. They just made the dollar as good as gold. And then the other currencies they're not backed by gold, but they were pegged to the dollar. So that's why people had to, countries had to accumulate dollars if they wanted gold, or if they wanted to trade with other countries. Maybe they knew that eventually that would not work. In 1971, yeah, we're told, of course, that the U.S. started inflating, i.e., creating reserves that weren't backed by gold in the 60s to finance the Vietnam War, and also the Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs. And that's probably partly true, but it could also be part of what you're saying. It was a bigger agenda to try to destroy the system. The French and also the British. It wasn't just the French that asked for gold, because they had a lot of surplus dollars. The British did the same. A week before they had to close the gold window on August 15th, 1971, and President Nixon said it was going to be temporary.
Right.
They're still, so it was a default by the U.S. because the deal was that if I had $35 in credit with the U.S. Treasury, I could go to the Treasury and redeem that for an ounce of gold. And I mean, I've read a lot about that period, and people like I think Paul Volcker at the time, he was an advisor to the U.S. He worked for the U.S. Treasury. I think he was head of foreign affairs for the U.S. Treasury. And there was a lot of talk at Camp David on that weekend, because they closed the gold window on the Sunday, and they had two options. One was to stop the flow, because the U.S. was losing a lot of gold. It had 20,000 tons in the early 60s after the war, and it was down to like 10,000. So they had to stop the run of gold. So there are two options. One was to raise interest rates so that people would put their money back in dollars and not demand gold. And the other one was to close the gold window or default. And they chose the latter because politicians, they never like high interest rates. And then, of course, ultimately they had to go to the Saudis to do a deal to increase demand for the dollar, and that was the petrodollar deal, where the Saudis and OPEC would only sell oil for dollars, and that basically that's how the U.S. was able to keep the dollar, the demand for dollars, even though it was backed by nothing.
Now, would this also coincide? I feel like this is the time to ask when the UK entered into the EU, I learned recently that it was around what, 73 or something. Like they didn't actually have a vote. They just pushed them in and told the people. Now,
Yeah.
would that be anything to do? Because I have a certain, theory around Brexit being about the, kind of the dismantling of this financial system, or basically separating out City of London with the rest of the, because God knows how this is all going to collapse. But I definitely think the decision of Brexit was a financial one, first and foremost. So would this depegging or coming off the dollar around this 1971 circa, I don't know, 71 to 73 time be, related at all with joining the EU?
Probably. And also, if you go back to 1971 as well, in the UK, they switched from the old system of measuring currency, like 240 pence to a pound, the shillings and all that old system, and they decimalized it. And I think that was a step towards moving towards Europe. So yeah, definitely. I mean, those things don't happen by accident. And by 1973 as well, the currencies, they try to keep the currencies pegged to the dollar after they left the gold exchange. It was a gold exchange system, or Bretton Woods, but it's very difficult to peg currencies when there's nothing that you have to redeem it in. So by 1973, we started getting this floating exchange rate system, this FX system, which is really, I mean, it's a strong word, but it's really an abomination, because it's like changing the length of the inch every second, or changing, how you measure the pound or a kilo every second. Can you imagine how life would be complicated if those measurements change? So when you take gold and silver from the system, which have been very stable money for thousands of years, and then when you make different countries' currencies backed by nothing, and they trade around, like crazy. That's why we have so many economic and financial crises. And is it any wonder, that London also became the center for FX trading? So you could be right. And I think Brexit, I was already doing my videos on the run up to Brexit. And I said, I think Brexit is a cover for the devaluation of the pound, because they're going to keep inflating. But what they're going to say, they're going to blame Brexit for the inflation. And I said that back in 2016, prior to the vote. And lo and behold, when you watch people now, a lot of people, a few weeks ago, I was playing golf with some friends, and I overheard them talking about the price of fuel, and all of them are saying, "Oh, it's Brexit." So yeah, I think you could have a point there.
And
then just to touch, oh, go ahead, Vicki.
Sorry, just in relation to that. So obviously Gordon Brown during 99 to 2001 sold off 56% of our gold reserves, over 400 tons. The euro was imminent, and it was always kind of intimated if the pound went 1-to-1 with the euro, it would have been that easy step in, because obviously that we just held above an exchange rate. Do you think that was a good kind of theory on that?
Well, I remember at the time his reasoning for selling half the country's gold was that he wanted to diversify into the euro, and he said that gold didn't provide an income, and the euro did. But there are some other interesting stories because I worked in the city and I've heard, and also from being in the gold market and following it, there are people who say that a lot of the bullion banks, the banks that trade gold in the city of London and on Wall Street, some of them were caught short, i.e., they sold too much paper gold. Then the price started rising. They didn't have any gold to to pay their clients who wanted to buy the gold. And apparently, Goldman Sachs was involved. This is just speculation, and they would have at the around the same time Goldman Sachs was going public, so that would have hurt them. And there was the economist for Goldman Sachs, uh, is an English guy, Gavin Davis, I think, if you look him up. He eventually went to work for Gordon Brown as an advisor. So there's a lot of things that could have happened, and I think it was more also at the time gold had been in a bear market since the early 80s, and a low gold price as well uh, signals to the market that there is no inflation, so interest rates stay low. And if you remember the Labor Party, they ramped up spending and borrowing, the housing boom. And I think it was part of that as well. The banker said, look, help us out and we'll keep, we'll manipulate interest rates lower and it will help the government. And the end result ultimately was a huge real estate bubble that blew up in 2007 and 8. So yeah, I think Gordon Brown is to blame for a lot of that, even though you see him once in a while pushing, that thing they want to put on us.
The jibby jibbies. So I know
England, Mario.
Excuse me.
How long have you been in England?
I arrived here in September '92. I lived in Switzerland before that. I got my first job in Switzerland in a small private bank, and then I was hired by a firm in the city, and I started on the day after the bank holiday, September. And a few weeks later, you had the ERM crisis, which was quite interesting when the pound fell out of the ERM and George Soros made his $1 billion. So yeah, so I've been here almost 30 years now.
Wow. Well, I wanted to touch base on just to follow it up with the CFTC, like fraud and manipulation, and where you think fraud in the precious metals place would be, and then transition into that little discussion about the Bank of England, because I think some people don't really understand why the Bank of England is so relevant. And then, but just to finish up on gold and silver, why is it that there's been allowed this long of manipulation? And if there was this severance or this temporary pause in 1971 from the gold, could that also have been planned to then manipulate the markets in this period of time? And perhaps they didn't mean to do it for 50 years, or perhaps they did, but was it just, okay, we've got 5 years, we're just going to manipulate the hell out of silver, or drive gold down? Like, what is it? Because now it's become just a joke that, these big banks can get $1 billion fines or 900 and whatever $1 million JP Morgan and still be operating and still be, I mean, what's the point? I mean, who cares? What they can do is trade or manipulate prices to then offset a fine like that.
Well, I saw a little video, maybe it was on TikTok the other day, and it said all these rules and fines, they're there to punish the small guy and the small gal, because very rich people, they can pay it off. So they write those rules. And as far as gold is concerned, and silver, there's a really interesting leak by WikiLeaks of correspondence between, I think it was the State Department or in the US and bullion dealers in London in 1974, because as of January 1st, 1975, gold was going to be made legal again for Americans to own monetary gold. FDR banned, he outlawed gold in 1933. So it was only in 75 that it was made legal again. And the US Treasury and the State Department, they were concerned that Americans would buy a lot of physical gold. So there was discussion with the bullion dealers in London. And why London? Because London was the center, and it's probably still is the center for bullion dealing, because in the US it was banned. And at one point, one of the guys in the WikiLeaks leak says, in this report in 74, says the creation of a gold futures contract on COMEX should help make gold more volatile and discourage the public from buying physical, and it will also encourage the public just to speculate in gold and not really buy the real thing. So yeah, the gold futures contract on COMEX was created on December 31st, 1974. So you could trade on that day, and then on the next day it was legal. But the COMEX and the gold futures contract in gold and silver, they're not really physical contracts, even though you can take delivery, but nobody ever takes delivery. And it's become more like a speculative, very volatile market, and it puts people off. People think, oh, gold and silver are risky. They're commodities. And I think that's how they've done it through the futures. Silver already had a futures contract because it was never banned. But I bought gold the first time in 2002, a few coins. And then when you buy gold, and you hold the coin, you realize how special it is, and you start looking into it. And with the internet, I did a lot of digging, and I was at work in the city at the time, so I watched the markets, all the time during the day. And I started following gold, and I saw that the price used to do the same thing at the same time almost every day. And I thought, that's weird, because I traded bonds in the city, government bonds. And the prices, they were more random. They didn't, gold futures like at 1:20 London time or 8:30 a.m. New York. I was always like puzzled. Why does the price always come down around 1:20? Then I realized that it's the opening for the COMEX gold future, the official open, because it does trade after hours, but that was the time when probably the major banks in New York, the Fed and others, that's when they put on trades for that day. And lo and behold, every time it was time for New York to open, you would see gold go down, and it go down to the stock market open, later on. And I think what that does, it tells American investors, well, gold is, down, there's nothing wrong. And someone has done some research. They've looked into the gold price, let's say for the last 20 years. And if you took out the time when the gold futures open and the stock market opens in the US, and you strip that out in the last 20 years, gold would now be trading at 5,000. So yeah, it is frustrating. They did the gold manipulation as well, and it was overt in the 1960s. It was called the London Gold Pool. They publicized that, but that didn't work either, because eventually, you can throw a lot of paper into the market, but if people start demanding the physical, they're going to have to cover their shorts, because the bankers know how important gold is, and they don't want to lose all their gold.
So in relation to that, we've got obviously Basel III, which came through. I think the EU kicked it off July 2021. I know January, the UK were due to join. And I think by July, wasn't it, the US were supposed to, but it's been delayed, has it not? Is it?
Well, yeah, the thing about Basel III is that it's rules written by the Bank for International Settlements. And I did a video today my video talked about the Bank for International Settlements, and guess who owns the bank? Well, the bankers do. You know, in 1930, J.P. Morgan, Citibank, they were the major shareholders and still are. So, yeah, I, I mean, there was a lot of discussion last year about Basel III gold prices, and it could have affected it. But I told people, you know, just focus on the fundamentals, you know, that we're going to have inflation, the currencies are going to keep dropping. And I know gold hasn't done well in the last 2 years, but over the long term, it will, I think. And yeah, so Basel III, yeah, it's
turning it into the tier asset because they have
yeah.
to.
Well, what it
Isn't
says
it?
is that gold is going to be an asset for you know tier will qualify as I think it's for the equity tier one equity of banks, and you can use gold to be part of that. But and it could still be you know, something that will come up if we have a new monetary system. That will become very important maybe for the banks, because I remember I worked at Citibank in the 90s for a couple of years, and their office was in the Strand in London, and there used to be a basement. They called it the gold room. So and they didn't have any gold there, but I think it was prior to 1971 they had to keep gold. So maybe Basel III is still not being utilized because they don't need it yet. But if what Jennifer said comes true, you know, that we could go into a new de facto gold standard, then that they might switch it back on.
We totally are. Okay, so really quick before we forget this, last you and I connected because I went on TV and said repeating what I had spoken to a lawyer about, that 10 days before lockdown, the Bank of England asset purchase facility refinanced government. So the 16th of March, 2020. The lockdown hid the crash by blaming it on COVID. Since 2019, the Fed had been buying up the stock market via BlackRock and giving it this false impression that this market was stable. Then I looked back at what he had also had said, and today and so you reached out to me on that, and we were going to talk about it at the time. But I thought, surely if something this large, you know, this would absolutely be picked up elsewhere. Surely someone better, you know, like an investigative journalist, somebody would have looked into this, especially since that video that you posted, you had sent me over Twitter. I did post in the channel where you know, right when all the QE was going crazy, that January 2020. And today I looked back at some of the notes that I had, and the government actually used a dormant company called the Bank of England Asset Purchase Limited, which is registered to the Bank of England address as they are, and BlackRock, which goes along with the Federal Reserve. So these were the notes that I wrote down. And I wanted to have this discussion with you as far as why this might be relevant, and what about it initially caught your eye or ear, you know, hearing me say that.
Yeah, the QE started in March 2020. And what was interesting at the time when we started discussing this, I think, is that the lockdowns were instituted, I think, on the 23rd of March. So, and at the time as well, the pound was melting down. It was down to 114. And Boris Johnson as well, he was calling for herd immunity. He didn't want to lock down the country. And he wanted to go the way of Sweden. And actually, Sweden used the UK blueprint to how to deal with the pandemic. So, and it's really weird that I think when the UK decided to lock down, the pound stopped dropping, and the Fed announced that they were opening swap lines to the foreign central banks. And swap lines are basically allowing the Bank of England, for example, to borrow dollars very cheaply and then take those dollars and sell them in the FX market and buy pounds to make the pound go up. And I found that really interesting, and almost like they're telling Boris Johnson, if you don't lock down, we're going to destroy you financially. And that has been done before. And you might ask when? Well, it was 1956 in the Suez Crisis, when France and England or Britain try to invade Egypt, because Egypt closed the Suez Canal. The Americans weren't very happy, and they told the British, if you don't stop this operation, the pound's going to go, you're going to be finished financially. And I think that's probably maybe what could have happened. The other thing that I think I spoke to you a few weeks ago was about January 2020. Like in the beginning of that year, we didn't know about COVID then. I don't even, it might have started in China, but it wasn't really a big thing. And in the first week of January, the UK Treasury, for some reason, issued 14 billion pounds in gilts, i.e. they borrowed 14 billion more than the market thought. It was a big shock. At the time, I thought it was really weird. But then after COVID started and all the QE or asset purchases, and that company was just the company that the Bank of England uses to do QE. They call it asset purchases, and they reactivated it because after the '08 crisis, they started doing QE and they stopped for a while. So that's all it was. But I think the issuance of 14 billion in gilts at the beginning of the year was a test run to see how the market would react, because they knew that this thing was coming. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but you follow the money and you find these things, because eventually they had to do almost £500 billion in QE. So yeah, that's how I see it.
And when this QE happens, how does it differentiate as far as destabilizing the currency or pushing down the dollar?
Yeah.
Not destabilizing, but you understand, debasing the currency.
Well,
how does it differ from an issuance as an SDR from the IMF?
Well,
or are they both equally?
The currency, I think, was stabilized by the swap line that the Fed opened for the Bank of England. The QE, what it did, it helped the government finance all the spending they had to do. What was it called? I forgot now. When people stayed at home.
Or the furlough.
The furlough schemes and all the other schemes that hundreds of billions of pounds they had to borrow. So what the QE is, the Bank of England will type on its keyboard 100 billion in reserves, and they use those reserves to go into the gilt market, which is the equivalent of U.S. Treasuries, and buy a lot of bonds. And what that does is that drives the price higher, and it drives yields low, or interest. So it keeps interest rates low. The other thing it does, it signals to speculators and bond traders that the Bank of England is going to be buying. So they front run the Bank of England. So it's a real scam. And it keeps the bond prices very high and yields low. So the government can basically borrow for free. So that's how they could finance all the furlough scheme and everything. But now all that easy money is starting to reflect in what I said earlier in this chat we're having, the dilution of the currency, the milk. It's becoming water, so that's why people can't buy as much anymore. That's why there's a cost of living crisis, because of that. And you can also add '08 as well. They did loads of QE in '08, so that's why we have a cost of living crisis. It's the government and the Bank of England that are to blame, really, not a war or a president of Russia, or, you know, it's funny how they say, oh, a rise in holiday package prices lifted inflation. You know, they report like that. They think, but people have got it upside down. So it's all this creation. That's what QE did. It helped the government borrow very cheaply, but now interest rates are starting to go up. For example, 10-year gilt yields were almost near zero, or like 0.5%. This year, they've gone above 2% already, which is still really low. And I expect them to keep going higher. And if the central banks decide to do QE again, yes, those bond yields might go down, but the escape valve will be higher prices of everything, especially gold and silver. So, and eventually, I think we're going to have a destruction of the currency, you know, a hyperinflation.
I think one thing we forget as well with inflation, we always look at everything going up, but actually with these, you know, this kind of debasement of the currency, I saw a report, I think it was yesterday, that the average American's annual wage is down by $3,400 when it comes to purchasing power. And that's what we kind of miss when we look at that. We see everything going up, but actually, as you said, you're not getting enough for your money anymore, not even close.
Yeah, you know, if you look at the way to look at it, I think is, you know, a loaf of bread is still a loaf of bread. It's the, you know, it might cost more, but it's the money that's worth less. You know, there's or currency. It's really better to say currency. So they issue so much currency that currency doesn't buy as much bread or as much milk. It's not the prices going up, you know, of things. And it's very easy to blame everything on supply chain or energy. But if you go back 50 years, I think what we're seeing now is the collapse of this fiat currency system. It's become so unhinged. There's so much credit and currency out there, and we haven't kept up. I mean, we outsourced a lot of the production and everything, and now all this outsourcing is being reversed as well. So it's a big mess.
Do you think that's partly due to maybe the US being reluctant to release their clause in being the world's reserve currency, and they're trying to desperately hold on? Because, I mean, we know how the world is flooded with dollars now. It's just infiltrated everywhere. And as soon as it comes out of that, it's got no value. And
yeah, I mean, yeah, there was a French finance minister, I think it was Giscard d'Estaing. He became president. He said that the US has an exorbitant privilege where they can buy things with money printed out of thin air. And it's been a good thing, but it's also been a bad thing because America is the most indebted nation ever, you know, and I think that's why we're seeing countries trying to escape the dollar system. And yeah, it might be because of the Ukraine war, but I think that's just pushing them to go at it quicker. And yeah, I think that's what it is. And I think for the American public, though, yeah, it will be painful because it's going to be like when the UK lost its reserve status, global reserve, after World War II. They had to go on rationing and then had a lot of inflation. But we're still here. So all it means is that Americans are going to have to work harder, or they're going to really have to earn what they, you know, I'm not saying Americans don't work, but it's been easier for Americans. I mean, I haven't been there in a while, but I remember going there. Something that costs, let's say, a pound here in the US would cost $1, and the pound was like, you know, $1.50. So I think that's the way it's going to be. The dollar is not going to go away, but its purchasing power is going to keep going lower because there won't be as much demands, because it won't be it will still be a somewhat reserve currency, but not as important as it has been.
Mario,
Oh, sorry, go in.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, just going to just tie that up just briefly, just with, you know, Janet Yellen yesterday saying about the Americans or the US not being afraid to put further sanctions on countries. And I think that's been one of their main issues. Obviously, they've got the petrodollar. They want to drive everybody to only use that instead of trading gold. And you mentioned the BRICS, you know, well, we haven't mentioned BRICS specifically, but the other countries building a new economic system outside of the US. And I think it's going to be a bit of turmoil coming forward.
I agree.
Sorry, Jed, there you go. Oh, she's frozen.
Oh, you froze.
Oh no. Are you guys there?
Yeah, I think you froze a little bit.
You're back, you're back.
So when I also want to address that fake document or whatever, is it fake or when governments use strategies like the Bank of England and their dormant company is like a guise to either make policies directed towards, you know, the convenience of QE printing. I mean, then where does it stop with Bank of England? Do we assume the other banks get? Was this the fallout of the UK corporation, and was this now an entrance in to globalist handouts from the various organizations of complicity and tyranny? And do they use these shell companies via these banks, you know, in ways as instruments? Like, you know, what the point of this meeting that we're talking about? Is that just indication of further, you know, addressing all the other points, or could one make an argument that actually this is how government has been functioning in plain sight?
Well, they have. I mean, that company, Asset Purchase Limited, whatever it's called, it's not really anything that's been hidden or anything. It was dormant because that's what they used after the '08 crisis to do the QE. I didn't know that they had to form a company to do that. Maybe because, you know, the original rules of the Bank of England didn't allow them to do that. But as far as playing to international organizations, I think they are. You know, that the goal is to keep to have a one world currency. I think that's what these people are looking for, and the BIS will probably be the head of that. And but the Bank of England, the Fed will still be around. It will be just like we have now the Fed. We have the Federal Reserve Board in Washington, D.C. Then you have the regional banks. And then the next step for them is to have the BIS. They will be the top dog. And then, you know, the Fed will be like a regional bank. And the Bank of England, the same thing. So I'm not surprised they did that. And the QE is just a way to keep kicking the can down the road, to keep, because this fiat currency system, you need to keep creating debt to keep it going. And if interest rates go up too far, the market rates, the system implodes. So that's why they have to keep printing money to monetize the debt. And that's what they did in Weimar, Germany in the 20s. And I'm sure you guys know what happened there.
Bucket loads.
In Myanmar, is that what you said?
Weimar, Germany.
You broke up.
Yeah, Weimar, Germany.
Weimar, sorry.
Yeah,
No.
the hyperinflation, because the Germans, they started monetizing the debt, the central bank there, to keep interest rates low. And they're doing the same thing here. They don't call it monetizing debt because they do it indirectly through the secondary market. They don't buy straight from the Treasury, the Bank of England, but for all intents and purposes, that's what they're doing. The banks buy it for them, and then they go to the banks the next day and buy it from them. That's what QE is all about. It's just debt monetization.
Is this the repo market that, you know, keeps going up and going crazy, that makes everyone?
Yeah, that's separate, the repo market. in the US, yeah, the reverse repo market. I think that's just where the US banks, they have regulations that were lifted during COVID, and then they put the regulations back on last year. So basically, the repo market is when the banks have too much cash, they don't want to lend it to the public, so they lend it to the Fed every day. They roll over, they keep lending, and that goes into the Fed as a reverse repo. I think it's just a sign that there's still a lot of liquidity out there, and the banks are not confident enough to lend it to the private economy, but it's separate from QE.
Okay. And when we see the IMF now take what was a few good people in their membership club with the highest GDP and then open it to all baskets of currencies. At the same time, you see this global concerted effort of shutting down lockdowns. I mean, would you draw the same kind of correlation where there might be a connection there that, you know, in order to debase everybody at once, you make them all part of the membership club and on the same basket of currencies? What are your thoughts there, considering the majority of the SDRs were printed in the last few years?
Yeah, it was 650 billion. And yeah,
At all?
yeah, I think it's just to yeah, the lockdowns and the destruction of the economies for a while is just to push people, countries, nations into dealing with the devil, so to speak, and you know, that 650 billion SDR. And the SDR is really because when the US left the gold standard, there was a banker called John Exter. He worked for the Fed in the 50s, and he said the dollar's become an I owe you nothing now because there's no gold. And then he wrote about the SDR, and he said, that's even worse. He said, who owes you nothing? It's like, it's just created by, it's really crazy. And I think that's a step towards pushing people towards this BIS world currency. So they'll have some kind of position in SDRs, and then they might link the SDR to the world currency. Who knows?
Yeah. Am I incorrect to assume that each country is meant to pay back their loan from the IMF?
Probably, but yeah, and I think they give them the, you know, the amount they get. It depends on how big their economy is. I'm not too sure whether they have to pay it back, but at least they'll have to keep paying interest because that's how they operate, the IMF and the World Bank.
So they print more of everyone's money and then charge you a percentage for it back.
Yeah, that's the whole
perfect way of saying, well, then now you're part of our world currency.
Yeah, that's
Stop
right.
No.
Yeah, and COVID was a great excuse to do that because it's beyond borders, right? It's global, so and you can justify like a world currency when you have global problems.
Yeah. So on that, everybody, when I, you know, was asking around if anybody had seen that document you had sent me that you said, do you know if this looks fake? But then we had mentioned, and then someone had found a clip in my channel where, you know, the use of secret leaked documents that can also be, I mean, I can post it in the channel, guys, but it was this secret document basically intentionally admitting to of the economy, remember? And
I remember that. Oh, yeah.
Didn't look that legit, but given all the other things we're talking about, you're like, well, and then, you know, given that there is, you know, people that we've seen this before where there's been a debunked document seeded where the sentiment is real, although the document is fake, but you're not allowed to discuss it because it's just a fake document, you know, and so that's why I wanted to mention that, because when I posted it, there were people that were like, I'm surprised he thought that. Do you want to talk about why you actually thought there was something to what was on that document?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, because I think, the reason, that crisis is probably, like I said, the only way to justify a new currency, world currency, is for the present system to collapse. So it makes sense that document was saying everything about that, and you have to also indebt the countries even more so that they can collapse. They already indebted the West a lot after the '08 crisis, but now they had to do it even more. So that's why I think it makes sense, that document. But like you said, they could make it fake to discredit us from talking about these things. But who knows?
They do it all the time. We've called them out at a few times on my channel, like over the year. Not to mention it's like CIA tactics. I mean, there's a great clip. I'll find it and I'll send it to you on Telegram, where they've talked about there's various projects or things. It's a way to just sway public opinion easily, so like this BBC show on the unvaccinated, it's really not about to understand what they're thinking, but basically to clip together all the clips where they mess up so they could make it appear like they're that this show has nothing to do with about having an honest opinion, but just to kind of contrive a narrative that sways public opinion. And they do it, across the board, from the economy, is it transitory, not transitory, health issues, the way they indoctrinate, the propaganda push. I mean, there's just, so, I when people sit there and they're like, that's a fake document, or I need a link. I mean, look, half this stuff doesn't have a link yet. We're writing history as we're going to look back and look at the epic disaster these lockdowns were, and the financial costs that we all bear today. And how we move into this new financial system. I mean, how we go from point A to point B. I mean, I love how you kind of break it down today, your video on the 100-year war, or the global, the bankers' 100-year plan for a global currency, or I think that was the title of your.
Yeah.
But we've talked about it. We had a discussion where I think banks are going extinct. I think they're going to be innovated out of the market, because as soon as we run on these new payment rails, I would highly surmise that once we break out of the chains, when we realize this debt enslavement camp we've been into, I think this power, this one world government, this false power will backfire. Because what I keep saying, and I heard you say this on one of your videos, like the technology's been there, the plan has been there. This is nothing new, a world government or a world currency. I personally think it'll fail. I don't think, that they'll get away with it, especially now, given this slow bleed of information that the public consciousness has had to come to. And one of the reasons I'm so thankful to have this conversation with you today is there's a lot of people that Vicki and I have been kind of talking to and, nurturing in our group, where we want to expose other voices in this space that also have really sound opinions. So you're one, that I've been following. So thank you for sharing your.
You're welcome. And the other thing as well, even if they succeed, at least we know what they're doing and how they're doing it, so we can protect ourselves. But I like you, also think that they won't succeed. I think I do my live stream on Sundays, and sometimes I have a guy called Rafi Farber. He's from Israel, and he pointed out that the Tower of Babel is like, it's like it symbolizes that urge of these people to control the world, centralize it, and it never succeeds. They try and try. So I think you're right. They won't succeed, but they're going to keep trying really hard.
Sure. Oh, sure. And they've done some really, very extreme ways. I mean, between the propaganda push, now we're going into climate change. I mean, it's whatever they can. Yeah. And the hypocrisy, I mean, it's really astounding how many people are still asleep at the wheel, where you're like, dude, where are you living? Under a rock? Where it just seems so obvious. You have these Davos meetings with a bunch of private jets from guys that want to allow tax evasions for private jets. yet they, don't want anybody to even use a train across the country. I mean, because of climate change. I mean, what? Uh, so I guess, Vicki, are there any questions? Because I kind of touched on, I'm so excited I got to touch on everything that I wanted to talk to you about, except for maybe numismatic gold. Are you a fan? Are you a Saint fan like I am?
I do have some numismatic coins, gold and silver. I like silver a lot too.
Yeah, yeah. I went to go sell some, and actually the bars, they're so easy to sell. So, I mean, I could definitely see the value of holding those, but I'm such a sucker for the old stuff. We found some Aztec coins at an antique shop, and I love the Royal Beasts. I mean, wish I was back in the UK to go to some of those events, because I love the Royal Mint event. I tell Vicki all the time I would drag her to with me.
There's some good coin shows in London, like numismatics as well.
Oh, that would be so fun.
I met
and I can live stream it for you, Jen.
have you read the book called Illegal Tender? You should look it up. And
okay.
it's about the 1933 double eagle.
Yes.
Yeah, you should read that book. And the coin dealer who bought it in London, he was at one of the coin expositions that I went a few months ago. And yeah, it's really interesting, the coin shows in London. But yeah, Illegal Tender. I thought let me get the book here.
I will definitely read it. I love those kind of books. I don't know why. I think that time period, that 1907 and 1933.
Hold on. Let me. Let me set up.
Literally blurs everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Other than half my family, apparently.
None. Okay. All right. Here's the book.
Okay.
Nice. There's my lady.
Yeah. And it's Gold Greed and the Mystery of the Lost 1933 Double Eagle. So
I mean, the rule, those who have the gold make the rules. And that rule specifically outlined the pre-33. There was like in a different category.
Yeah. The guy who, John Wooden, he was the US Treasury Secretary under FDR, who banned gold, but he said numismatic coins will not be banned because he was a coin collector.
Yeah.
And that stayed in the books.
Yeah, and there's like also it's not forced IRS reporting. So if you were to sell one of those, I mean, obviously you need to or whatever. I mean, pay the shell company in Puerto Rico if you still are into that. I can't wait for the new system to come out. That's actually why, I mean, we're doing this XRPL project because I don't trust the banks and I want to build our own. And because my husband has the capability, and he's the one that 10 years ago at the cabinet office, I mean, he held security clearance with the Bank of England. This is why we kind of know what the Bank of England was up to. And back in 2016, there was the Ripple Innovation team saying, okay, they're going to crash the economy. We're going to move to this. But it was like, okay, great for that information. That Bitcoin's what's cool. Why am I going to hold a bunch of little coins for whenever you guys decide to collapse this? So that was on my radar a long time ago. But now with Russia playing its hand and Bretton Woods last week, and now gold coming back in the mix. And as an avid listener to Lynette Zhang, you and then, George Gammon and other people, who else do I like? I'm thinking David Morgan. I mean, some of these really people that are speaking out about silver and I'm thinking there's got to be a marriage here. And then Judy Shelton's move into a cryptocurrency kind of, back to the future in a cryptocurrency kind of way. So then when I look at the development of how these blockchains will work, and this ILP, this interledger protocol, which allows any currency to be changed to anything backed by hard assets. So whether it's oil, petrol, or the metals or the oil, or however they want to break that down, you can actually create a new system outside of this central bank Ponzi system.
Yeah,
so
I think that's interesting, but and it would be good that's decentralized, but I think we need trust as well, because
Oh,
that's
for
because you should be able to redeem, this, excuse me, crypto gold or whatever, because then, you need to keep honest as well. I think that's the way.
transparency, trust, verifiability, all these things for real this time. Not false fake numbers where you're a depositor and then you have to come back in the line after the derivatives. These creditors or depositors will never get their money out of this system if one so decides to lock down one's wallet.
Yeah,
And
we saw that in crypto. Was it what was it called? Luna coin?
Yeah, Luna.
Well, Luna, I mean, that again, that shows, bad manage. I mean, Luna Terra, I mean,
Yeah,
that
right.
was a stable coin that they wanted. I don't know. I mean, those aren't ones that I necessarily, I mean, we
Yeah.
had a bit of
Never.
tradable Terra, still do, but that was not one of my ones to watch. Of course, the one I like is the one being sued by the SEC. But
So
the
we
one
have one for a winner.
that one is also, exposing the hand of the three-letter corruption. And, I don't know how far the ETHgate bit goes, but the part that has been made public just in the last year of this lawsuit has really asked a lot of questions about what kind of favoritism, special interests, with all these government officials within, regulating the space of crypto. It was like a free pass for Ethereum, but then XRP gets on the chopping block. So now we're kind of looking at XRP and XLM, the ISO accredited coins, and with the theory that they will be backed by a rainbow of metals, gold, silver, possibly palladium, maybe copper. I mean, but we'll see. I think the main ones are I hold physical gold and silver, and then whatever I do own in digital assets are off on a ledger. And, when people get very fearful of a new surveillance system, I sit there and I'm like, look at the one we're already in. And I understand that it is quite frightening. I think Canada forced their hand. I've said this on other interviews. I think they played their hand too fast and showed how easy it is to target, like, we can't find the people that Ghislaine Maxwell has trafficked to, but yet we every single trucker, and so it was just what? So this made a lot of people start recognizing the insanity of this SWIFT protocol, ACH Ponzi bank system that is completely controlled. The fear of the surveillance system. Look, it's not as overt as China, but that's where they're going if you let them. So open your eyes now and see what you're in, because they didn't even have to roll out a social credit system here. You're just in it. You're part of that fractional reserve. Your dollars are actually being traded elsewhere where you think you own what you have. And it's only lawful by government decree. Like, there's nothing there. So I've been watching this. I love talking. I mean, thank you so much. Vicki, do we have any time? Are there any questions on the channel?
We've got lots of questions in it, but I'm only going to pick a couple, if that's okay, that are quite pertinent to the chat we've had and relevant.
Okay.
So looking at bank bail-ins, Jules asked 2 parts. How long do you think we'll be able to use cash for? And will they take a percentage of anything people have in their bank accounts or take the lot?
Well, cash here in the UK, I think it's still going to be used for a while longer. I mean, even though I think they're trying to phase it out, I think maybe in 10, 15 years, probably we won't have cash, because a lot of the elderly people who still like to use cash, they'll probably be gone by then. Unfortunately, that's the way life works. And as for them taking cash from our bank accounts, I don't think they can do that legally, but they can do it through the bail-in, and that would be for any amount over 85,000. And that's one of the reasons why I tell people that it's a really bad idea to have too much currency balances with the banks. And if you are going to have more than 85, open another bank account.
But Mario, how can you say that even what's lawful when all bets are off. When that liquidity crisis comes, I mean, even under 85 grand, who's insuring that really?
Yeah, the FSCS, FSCS, I think. And I did say earlier that if there's a huge crisis, 3 or 4 banks collapse, that will all be gone. And that's another reason why I tell people only keep enough cash in the bank that you need for your expenses. And if you have a lot of savings, think about paying off debt, buying some gold and silver, or buying something that you want, you'd always like. Buy a car. A car is worth something. But don't leave it in the bank, especially when you have the CPI at almost 10%. And I was checking with my NatWest Bank account. The highest interest I get is 0.1. And I even complained to them, and I made a complaint. They said, well, there's nothing wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. It's just that our rates are really low. But so yeah, it's no point. You either spend it or you put it in real money, gold and silver, and yeah, pay off your debts as well.
Perfect. So Lynn T has asked, when do you think the Bank of England will reverse the course on the interest rises and then go full QE on steroids? And what potentially could the excuse be that used to do that, i.e. COVID, economic collapse, UBI, World War III? I feel one more interest rate rise and QE by September, October. Do you feel similar?
Yeah, Andrew Bailey came out today and he said, don't count out the possibility of a 50 basis points rise, because they've been raising it by 25. So I think they are going to do 50. I think that it's in July, beginning of July, they're going to meet. And I think by the fall, they'll stop raising rates. I'm not sure when they'll start cutting again. But yeah, there will be an excuse, a huge crisis, and to justify reversing everything. And historically, when countries go into this path of inflating the system, like we've had since '08, they can never stop. And every time there's a crisis, the how can I say, the injection becomes even more, even bigger. It's almost like a drug addict. The more drugs you take, you start small and you have to take more and more. And that's the same thing with the economy. Eventually, the whole thing will just implode. The currency will collapse. But I think they will do it before the end of next year. They'll have to go full. They call it full.
Yeah. Money gun.
Yeah, money gun.
Okay, final question then. I can't say his name. Meshach Philip. Apology if I've ruined that. What would happen to silver on a potential gold standard?
I think it will. It might even be. I think it should be used as well. We could have a bimetallic standard because gold is more for preserving wealth, and silver is more for everyday transaction. It's like change, but
Barter.
barter. And I think it would. Right now the price of silver to gold is really. You need like 100 ounces of silver right now, which is really high, or maybe just a little less. But historically, it should be around 15 to 1. So I think silver could outperform gold if gold.
Oh,
Yeah.
15
to 1. Yeah, that's. I mean, that's historically the last 300 years. Up until the late 1800s, the U.S. was on kind of a bimetallic standard, and 15 ounces of silver would buy an ounce of gold.
So it's manipulated that much where now
Silver has been manipulated even more than gold, I would say.
Do you think that's because of its commercial value when it's used in phones and solar panels? And
there's what you call the Silver Users Association in the U.S. There are people like what's the jeweler, famous jeweler in the U.S. They sell silver. stuff.
Tiffany?
They're part of the silver users. So they love low silver prices because they can buy it cheap and sell their jewelry really expensive. But I think the bankers, they fear silver even more because people can afford silver. They could, take their pounds and dollars, paper money, and put it into silver. And you look at the historically, in many countries, the word silver and money are interchangeable. Like in France, argent means money. I think in Hebrew, it's the same thing. And yeah, in Spanish, plata means money as well. So.
And we've had a stop on oh gosh, I can't think of the word, Texas Mint, when they stopped for a while. And the Australian Mint stopped with the silver for a while for the mintage of the coins. So they've had some hiatus, haven't they, throughout?
I forgot to say in the UK as well, the name for our currency, sterling, that's from sterling silver. So there you go.
I love it. Oh, it's fantastic to talk to you. Thank you, Mario.
You're welcome.
Thank you for reaching out, and I'm glad the Bank of England has united us. the meeting before lockdown, this legendary meeting, and I will continue to ask everyone I can to find out more about it, because I, like you, remembered it enough at least to just say it. But I'm so glad I did, because then I love learning, meeting people like you and then finding out what's really going on here, because it's definitely not what they're telling us on the TV.
No.
So anyway, thank you again for joining. Thank you for everybody at home. Thank you, Vicki. Any last words, you guys, from either of you?
Not really. Don't watch TV.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't watch it.
Well, you're the home of alternative economics, so.
Yeah. And contrarian views. Yeah.
And contrarian views. Yeah, I love that. I love that bit. It's like the disclaimer, because I'm allowed to now say things that don't fit with it, media say. So, and I love that you're there in London, because I would be right there with you going, whoa, look at what's happening. But I'm doing it from here, I guess. So thank you again for joining us, and everybody at home. And hopefully we've made a little bit of sense here to help break down some of the stuff that's happening in the economy and why we keep bringing up, gold standards and manipulation in this silly Bank of England and QE and all this kind of stuff. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.